Going to do some announcements. I'll step off when you start presenting. I might just sit down in the corner.
All right.
We can just get that back too, yeah. Our AV guy's a volunteer, so don't give him too hard a time. Yeah. He actually is doing us a huge solid, so it's a real dick move of me to make fun of him.
All right, I think we're as good as we're going to be.
Beautiful. Well, thank you guys all for coming. I'm Wyatt O'Rourke. I'm the founder of Basilic Financial, founding member of the space, on the board, and very excited to welcome you guys here. Basilic is a state-registered RIA. We are fee-only fiduciary. We really focus on helping our clients find funding contentment where money and meaning are in balance. We do this across 4 different services. We have Bitcoin financial services, retirement planning services, financial planning, and portfolio management. I'm honored to welcome our guests from Seattle, Matt and Cameron from Build Asset Management. If we could please give them a warm round of applause. Before we get into the presentation today, I just want to give a moment for our beloved Rocky Wold. He was supposed to be a part of this presentation with us, beloved space member of our community. Unfortunately, had a death in the family. So if you please just join me with a brief prayer to honor him and his family. Lord Jesus Christ, most merciful Son of God, please bless Rocky and his family with grace and mercy as they navigate this difficult situation. Amen. Also want to give a huge shout out to the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Man, this has been a labor of love, but probably the coolest project I'll ever work on. So this is one of 3 Bitcoin citadels in the United States of America. It's a very cool project that has been a community-driven effort here by the local and non-local Bitcoiners in the Denver area. There are 2 others. One's in Nashville, one's in Austin. Those had a little more top-down approach. They've been very gracious with offering advice and pointing us in the right direction. But what makes the space special is that this was a ground-up movement, right? This is a community-driven effort. Going out to the community, raising dues, trying to make an idea become a reality. And so it's something very awesome that we're able to be in this beautiful building, sharing Bitcoin with each other, sharing each other's company. And so won't be here without a bunch of help in the crowd. If we have some space members, could we raise our hand? Wow, see, that's amazing. That's amazing. If anybody has any questions about joining the space, just tap any one of those guys who just raised their hand, or gals who just raised their hand. We'll be happy to direct you to the right spot. We have a newsletter. We're sending periodic updates about what we're doing, events that are happening. We have 2 membership tiers. We have a co-working membership tier, which is $300 a month. That gets you 9 to 5 access to the building. For a floating desk, it's kind of like a Bitcoin WeWork. Then we have the social club, which is our social membership is $150 a month. That is, access to member-exclusive events. We have some pretty cool tech initiatives that are member-exclusive. Gets you access to the building after hours on the weekends, and so really encourage you guys to check that out. Now, I want to give a huge thanks to our audience. Very appreciative of everybody who take the time out of the day. I know we're all busy to come and learn about finance and Bitcoin, everybody's favorite topic, mine specifically. And so we have a bit of a diverse audience here tonight, which I'm super excited to share and bring to the space. We have about 1/3 financial professionals, 1/3 Bitcoiners, and about 1/3 somewhere in the middle. And that's particularly fun for me, seeing my worlds collide. And I also think it's going to be hilarious because half the room is going to be staring at us with blank stares while the other half is like fully engaged. And that will happen multiple times throughout the event. And so I'm going to give away the financial professionals, including myself right here. So all the Bitcoiners can turn and laugh at them. But Basilican Build are registered investment advisors. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investment, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and otherwise stated are not guaranteed.
Can you repeat that? Hey, it'll come out great on the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So with that being said, I'm honored to welcome Matt Dines. He's the co-founder and CIO of Build Asset Management. Build started a firm to address the growing credit problem in the United States of America and global credit markets, which he's going to do an excellent job breaking down and explaining for us here. So that being said, welcome, Matt.
Awesome. I'll stand up for this, but I want to get done with these in 20 minutes. I don't want to lose your attention. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the tacos. Mr. Oso, I thought that was fantastic. So round of applause for Cameron and Rachel in the back did all the groundwork getting that great dinner to you tonight. So thank them. One other important piece of business here before we get going. I realized this last week. I'm a big NBA fan. I want to get out of the way of this so y'all can see it. But I didn't realize till about a week ago. We had this all plotted out. But tonight's the Nuggets season opener. So any Nuggets fans in the room? All right, awesome. Tonight's the season opener. Starts in 30 minutes. Rocky's unfortunate family loss means we have an extra ticket. So come up, talk to me after we're done. If you've got no other plans, I've got great seats. There's no other way to do it. 15th row mid-court, so have a good time. Meet some fun new friends to hang out with. So one other thing, Cameron and I are coming down here from Seattle, and if anybody's followed the NBA, we got done dirty by a guy named Clay Bennett. He stole our franchise, and that franchise now goes by the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they're playing them tonight. It'd be, I hate to root for someone to lose here, but I would love to see the Nuggets crush them tonight, as well as get the chance to see an all-time great in the play. So that's not just home team, home crowd, playing to you guys. I really want to see them crush the fake Sonics, as I call them. All right. I think that's all the business to get out of the way. Wyatt introduced. So Build is a credit-focused asset management firm, SEC registered, investment advisor. I'm not going to make you listen to anything about the boilerplate disclaimers. But we started our business, in the 2010s, watching what was going on with the U.S. dollar credit system, and just being a student of history, zooming out and taking a big picture view. Had the sense that this wasn't going to work out well for the debt holders, people saving their purchasing power, their time, labor, and effort in USD IOUs. So my partner John is not here tonight. He's got to make his pilgrimage to the space. I'm glad to be the first, proud to be, honored to be the first speaker here. This is one of many more to come, and they'll get definitely more high profile than me. So you'll get bigger guests for sure. But no, we are onto something in USD credit, building on Bitcoin as the ideal perfected collateral layer. That's boilerplate. Let's get out of the way. I'll try to get out of here in 20 minutes. Then we could get on to the fun stuff. So we titled this talk, The Financialization of Bitcoin. It is Halloween, so you'll see there's a cat on there to celebrate the season, but that's just not any cat. It is Schrodinger's cat, right, if you see those fancy equations. So is anybody in the audience familiar, anybody understand or aware of Schrodinger's cat? Yes. Can anybody explain it for the group? Anybody want to raise their hand, give a little brief synopsis? Any physics experts in here?
The cat is both dead and alive?
More or less, yes. It exists in both. It exists in both states at the same time, correct. And we don't need to go deeper on this, but we'll just leave it at that. Both things are true, right? And so you've heard, a lot of you in the room are probably friends with people like Nick Bhatia, others in the space, who've been saying for 10 years, coming from the TradFi space in credit markets, who've been saying for 10 years now that Bitcoin is pristine collateral, and that's where this is going. But we live in a world where it's actually both things at the same time. It's like, how can you hold that? Two thoughts in your head. Like most of the people in this room, I imagine, are probably Bitcoiners. I don't want to make anybody raise their hand. Don't dox yourself. Sorry, we are at the space after all. But there's also a few in here who are new to Bitcoin, which is great to see. So hopefully we can bring new people into this kind of broader awareness of what this thing actually is and why the right decision is to get involved, whatever that means to you. But I subtitled this, A Framework for Understanding How Bitcoin Both Is and Is Not Pristine Collateral. Like those are some fancy little eigenstate little notations there, but it is and is not both of these things at the same time. So how can that be? Little messy slide here, but this is roughly what you would approximate the legacy capital markets current assessment of what a sound collateral represents. How do you know that, right? Well, you go to the exchanges where the leverage is actually conducted. So in the United States, that group is the CME group. It's got the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CBOE, NYMEX, et cetera. This is where all of your contracts, like the WTI, contracts that oil price is off of, they all trade. All of these global asset prices, these beacons, if you will, are set by this group. Now, when you trade on these futures, derivatives, and commodities exchanges, how does it actually work? Anybody in here ever trade futures? There's a lot of people who just speculate. Like, you know, some people might do it. Okay, all right. Nobody in this room is a futures CBOE speculator. All right, the way it works is, say you buy long futures. You can buy SOFR futures, Treasury futures. You can buy orange juice futures. If anybody's seen the movie Trading Spaces, right? Great little plot element there. It's a real thing. What you have to do is you have to post collateral, right? And then with your collateral accounts, you set a margin balance. And you have different choices of what is an acceptable collateral. But once you do that, you post your asset. It's got to be custodied with someone like the BNY or Bank of New York Mellon, something like that, a registered Brown Brothers Harriman, a registered and accepted custodial institution. But once your asset is parked there, you can now essentially lever it up. You can go long oil futures. You can sell WTI futures. You can sell corn. You can do whatever you want and lever, you know, most of these things it's 10 to 1. So it's a this is where a lot of leverage in the financial system actually lives. So if you look here, what defines a good credit? You go by every asset class. They maintain a list. You can just Google this, go to their website. It's the acceptable collateral list, or what they call it is CME Clearing's collateral management program. And the two defining features of all of these assets, you've got number one, the maximum you can post as collateral per clearing member. So most of these assets have limits. You see here, I should have made these bigger, but this is $1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion, and infinity, no cap, right? I'll go through. What gets the no cap special treatment? That's going to tell you what the perceived collateral is, or pristine collateral is within the context of legacy capital markets. And on the bottom, the x-axis, you've got your haircut. So this is in reverse order. It makes sense to think of it this way because better is on the right. And in terms of a haircut, lower is better. It's golf. Right? A haircut means, let's say I post $1 million of assets as collateral. How much credit will I be given in my margin account? How much will they count that for to lever up against? And so if I take a 0% haircut, it'd be technically $1 for dollar. The only 0% haircut asset is technically cash or a bank deposit. You park your bank deposit at a custodial bank like BNY Mellon. That you can post infinite amounts of cash, no haircut, and lever up that way. You don't want to use cash, though, essentially. Anybody have an idea why? I mean, it's good in some regards. It's the most liquid asset from the standpoint of the framework, but I'll just give away the answer. It gets debased, right? You get inflated. Like, it's not an option. Like, it's in the cards. You're going to lose purchasing power in a non-interest bearing, fiat asset. Like, that's just how the system works. But the next most items in terms of near cash treatment are, you'd probably not be surprised here, it's treasury bills. So if you see this kind of stream of green dots, the laser pointer doesn't push through onto the screen, unfortunately. It's useless here. But if you see that cash dot and you move left, what you work out from is the duration of your treasury bonds. So you go from cash to treasury bills. Treasury bills are extremely liquid. They don't fluctuate in purchasing price. You'll take, like, let's say a 0 to 1, somewhere like that, a 1% haircut on your treasury bill. So your treasury bill, you're going to earn 5% right now. If I post $100 million of collateral, of T-bills in my account, I can essentially get $99 million worth of credit and lever that up that way. So essentially what this is saying, this should be no shocker to anyone here, your treasury debt is the pristine collateral in the system, bar none. So haircuts, it's got the minimum haircuts, and there's no limits. You can post as much of that as you want. And in terms of the entire collateral base of the futures, derivatives, and commodities exchanges globally, they don't publish like how much of the assets are treasuries versus other things, but it's gonna be very heavily tilted towards treasuries. That's where a lot of these treasury issuance, everybody's seen that chart, right, of what's going on with the public debt situation. That winds its way up here on the exchanges. You move into things like money market funds, which are really just packaged funds of T-bills at this point. That's mostly all they're allowed to hold. T-bills and overnight secured repo. So it's bank lending secured by T-bills. So it's really just T-bills in a money market fund. It's up there in that top green quadrant of what the system actually views as pristine collateral. Down here in the lower box, I won't go into it, but it's basically foreign government IOUs from our friends. So we basically say, it's like, all right, if you're in our friend group, if you're in a G7 country, China's not in this blessed friends group, Russia's not in there, obviously. But if you're in the club, one of the things you get to do is you get to post your IOUs here, and you can get clearing members on exchange where a lot of the leverage in the system originates. You can use the foreign gov IOUs there as well as the government-sponsored entities, things like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Fed Home Loan Banks, like that's stuff, household names. You'll probably catch those on like front page of Wall Street Journal from time to time. But that's what lives in that other box. It's low haircut. They're just not that big. You can't lever them up that much. So there's not as much sponsorship there, obviously, as treasuries. And then over here, this is the private sector stuff. It's the private sector's IOUs, so corporate bonds, equities, so our actual companies in the real economy, and then real assets. But the only real asset they accept is gold, right? So these come with a haircut of 15 to 30%, but you're not allowed to scale these things up. The system wants the pristine collateral to be the sovereign debt IOUs, ideally the US Treasury IOUs, is the way this is all incented. Now, notice, Bitcoin is not anywhere on this list. Like, what would the haircut be on Bitcoin? I'll tell you what it'll be. The haircut on Bitcoin for like a secured loan, going to Unchained, and Rocky was gonna be a part of this, if you go to Unchained and you want to take out a Bitcoin-backed US dollar loan, you can go into, we can talk about it after the fact if you want to talk about why Unchained setup is uniquely different and operationally better risk managed than all others, in my opinion, who we've assessed in the Bitcoin-backed lending space. Their loans originate at a 40% loan to value, which means if you come in with $1 million in Bitcoin, Unchained will lend you $400,000 worth of USD capital, right? Just bank deposits. That's essentially the same thing. That 40% LTV is effectively a 60% haircut. It's the same thing. It's 1 minus that 40%. So Bitcoin is like way over here, and the amount you can scale up, the entirety of the amount is probably like $10 billion in total, not just like per clearing member here. So Bitcoin is like, on this chart, it's like way over here if we really wanted to plot this. And that's where you get into the juxtaposition. If you talk to this system, this Bitcoin over here is nothing like pristine collateral. And that's why when you go out, and me, like as a fixed income credit manager, institutional portfolio, I'm assessed, I'm ranked against, my peer group, T. Rowe Price, Vanguard, all those household names. They don't even consider Bitcoin here. They consider that stuff, like that's the pristine collateral. Versus Bitcoiners in this room, you understand how Bitcoin works, the sound, everything. We don't have to get into the details, but we view it as a pristine ledger, right? We always know who owns what and why of the 21 million Bitcoin. So there's two paradigms, both things are true at the same time. That's why I thought Schrodinger's cat, besides being a cute Halloween tie-in, was, I guess, a nice little device to make the analogy. Now, we've all seen the Treasury debt situation. This blue line here on the left is the US Treasury debt securities outstanding This is not the total debt. You see 35 trillion where we're at right now. That's the actual number. This is what exists as bonds and bills, like they're securities you can trade versus ledger entries. Like some of that national debt is actually just IOUs to like the equivalent of a 401k plan for government workers. Like it's just an accounting entry. Like we got you. It's going to be printed, but like part of that. This is the slice of that debt. It's about 25 trillion now that you can take to these exchanges and post it as collateral. Now, how do you know how much of that is working its way into the collateral base within all the leverage in the system, right? You know it's there, but how do you measure it? Like, if you're like internal at CME Group, you probably have those numbers, but it's not public. All you have is a couple of reports. There's one from the CFTC that tracks the initial cleared margin per day. So when a position is opened, they have to report the margin posted on new positions opened, but it doesn't have maintenance margin. We can get into those details. And it's not backwards revised either, as you know, like positions on the futures are netted out as you know, the P&Ls are marked to market every day. Don't want to get too into the technicals. My point here is like the CFTC, the amount of margin cleared on a daily basis, it does actually track and correlate with the growth in Treasury securities. You don't have to get like a fancy statistician in here. It's like you kind of know it when you see it. And when you see an impulse of Treasury issuance creation, like we did in March 2020, we printed like $6 trillion worth of Treasuries overnight in the depths of the COVID collapse in March 2020. At the same time, if you see the growth of the margin or of the cleared margin in the CFTC reports, you see the same impulse work its way through that system. That's on the right. So these things, like you can see the shadow print of these. It's never going to be explicit like to the public unless you're privy to the inside information. But it's pretty obvious in the data. You create more treasuries, they show up as collateral on the exchanges. And this literally is kind of that Cantillon effect. It's like the base money gets printed first. The next ones to benefit from it are literally the bankers who are like the primary dealer banks, the counterparties on the QE transaction, all that stuff. And eventually, those treasuries work their way onto these exchanges, and then you get the futures trading in the actual financial assets. So all of your interest rate derivatives, futures, all of that. It sets rates. It also it establishes equity prices. Probably about 5 to 10% of the actual market takes place in futures for equities, and then commodities as well, your oil, your live cattle, your orange juice, your cheese, all of that. The price, this works its way through into the prices in the real economy. And this is how the money printing that takes place at the core it just works its way outwards into the goods and services in the real economy. And this partially explains, you see the impulse in treasuries, it shows up as margin, it dies off. But if you go back and look at the CPI, once it actually works into that 9% peak, that came in Q1 and Q2 of 2022. So it's literally a demonstration of the Cantillon effect, right? The last guys to take the costs of the money printing are the people in the real economy, and that's where the CPI showed up, right behind that impulse. So you know, it all makes sense as the smoking gun after the fact, but if you had to have the evidence to show like transitory, okay, sure, it's transitory, worked its way through, but it's all right there. All right, now relate this to the debt situation, right? We saw that treasury debt, everybody knows that chart, post it like wildfire, pay 35 trillion, right? They're crazy numbers now, right? And someone's got to buy those bonds. This credit creation from the US Treasury has to continue. You know, if you've heard Luke Gromen talk, a lot of you probably listen to the Bitcoin podcast space, but the new to Bitcoin people here, there's a lot of great analysis. If you follow Lynn Alden, Luke Gromen, kind of like macro strategist type of thinkers. If you look at the federal budget situation, we've got essentially the big four, and these are basically your entitlements, your IOUs that the system has signed up for over the last 100 years, that the checks are now coming due, and it's eating up more and more of the public budget space. So those big four, you say Social Security, healthcare, it's Medicare, Medicaid, but mostly Medicare, interest payments on the existing debt that you've racked up, and then defense for like the post-World War II kind of defense apparatus. That's going to eat up 77% of the federal budget within the next 10 years. So 10 years from now, 2034, 77%. This is in the CBO's numbers, right? It's already locked in. And just thinking like a financial analyst, how are we going to make this math work? This is the CBO's financial plan. As an asset manager, I can give you my own proprietary models, but just foot to the CBO's numbers because that's what they think they're going to do to get this thing to work. And when I say get it to work, it's like it will work technically. There's going to be repercussions, but like this is the game plan of what's going to happen. U.S. Treasury is going to need to issue $24 trillion in new debt over the next decade. So 35 trillion right now, add 24 on top of that, do the quick math. What is that? We're going to go from 35 to 60 trillion. It's kind of your base case right now. Could be more than that. That's just where we see it right now. Don't be surprised if we overshoot. Also embedded in that model, GDP has to grow. That's my 20-minute timer. As long as I still have everybody and you're interested, I can keep going. All right. Your GDP as a model input has to increase with that, right? Because your GDP growth is actually, it's really tied one-to-one. When you create more credit, what you're actually doing is you're trying to create more economic activity. So because you're creating credit, you need to see GDP growth on the other side. So the embedded assumption is 24, it's actually 24.4 trillion in new debt, but you're going to get 14.4 trillion incremental GDP over 10 years. That's annual. So we go from about 25 trillion now. In 10 years, we need the GDP number to hit 39, 40 trillion. That's what that's saying. This is just the model. Yeah.
So that 14 trillion, is that going to basically be nominal or real? So is that effective?
That's nominal. That's nominal.
So that's how much they have to inflate.
Yeah, so if you stack that growth of the nominal on, now what's the actual real growth of like real, how many new houses are we building? How many kids are we having? Like the actual real economy, that probably grows less. So when you stack on that nominal GDP onto the growth rate of real, we don't know what real is going to be. You could just make up a number, like just whatever it is. But you divide those two, and that's going to be the inflation that the system has to take, and price level inflation. Some people, when they say inflation, like you don't want to confuse between inflation is the growth in money supply, is like the classical monetarist definition. So I say like the price level would be the divisor of this nominal line divided by the actual goods and services. Yeah, thanks. All right. So new slide. Those were just model inputs from the CBO. Just take them as is. Like it is just handed on stone tablets on Mount Sinai. The implications of that, if you plot out credit creation, if you want to increase GDP by $14 trillion, how much total credit is the system going to need to create to do that? And so you do this based on you can back this out based on some data series that the Fed actually has aggregated going back to, I want to say 1967. Like this data goes back to like the post-World War II era, where they start trying to track all of the dollar IOUs in the entire US economy. So not just the treasury debt, but like your home mortgages, bank loans, private loans, credit cards, everything. They've got a time series on that. And so what you do is, or what I've done for this, is basically showing, like, let's say, so on the x-axis, this is your change in the total credit in the US economy. Y-axis is your change in GDP. To get more GDP going up, you actually need to create more credit. Like that's the way this monetary system works. If you want the full explainer on that, we won't go through it here, but watch the Ray Dalio video, how the monetary system works or how the economic engine machine works. It's like 30 minutes long, fantastic educational video. But basically what we've seen, like the entire like post-World War II period is we keep adding, more and more credit, but we get less GDP growth out of it, right? So if we were getting dollar for dollar in productivity back, like if our credit creation was actually economically break even, we'd be on this line, right? This green line for break even here. If it was actually if government and other credit creation was economically productive, you'd see the actual number, these data points be above this line. But that's clearly not what happens. You've got a declining marginal productivity of credit. As you keep injecting more and more units into this system, you get less and less bang for your buck out of it. So what does this imply? Remember I said we need $14 trillion increase in GDP. I basically plotted out here the doubling line, starting at half a trillion, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 4 trillion. We just landed at 16, call it a good number. They're wild ass guesses anyway. 14.4, call it 16. We know this general area is where we're trying to hit. And if you plot those on the lines on the existing curves that the system is kind of posting for its production, you land somewhere over there right on the bullseye. And basically, you're going to need the entire system to create at least $64 trillion in credit, like new credit, right? Just to keep this thing going. So that's the new number. You need 64 trillion. Well, what did we say the Treasury was going to do? 24, right? So 64 minus 24, you need 40 trillion other new credit claims created, right? Where is that going to come from? All right, now you look, this is actually broken down, that same report where I built the data set on to get those lines from the federal Fed's Z.1 report series. They break it down by groups. So you've got domestic financial sector, federal government, and rest of the world in blue. Rest of the world, I didn't lump it in with these two vagrants here, federal government and the domestic financial sector for any other reason. It just doesn't fit with my other group here in orange. So the orange group is your non-financial businesses. So businesses engaged in actual productive enterprise in the real economy. So they're making goods and services for people to economically trade with each other. Another one of these guys is households and nonprofits. I don't know why they put the nonprofits in with households, but that's just the way the data series works, and that's what we have. And then the one up here is state and local governments. They're tiny. They've essentially vanished to zero over the course of about 70 years here. Well, I call these orange ones here the private sector plus state and local governments. That's really your real economy. I put state and local in there because you actually have some involvement. They're not as bureaucratic as the federal government. You go to DC, it's just building after building after building. One bureaucracy per block. I'm not kidding. And then, so then if you see here, the actual credit creation that's taken place, it's had to increasingly, become dependent just to perpetuate this system on two institutions, the federal government and the financial sector. Right? When we say the financial sector, it's very top heavy. It's your big five banks. It's very weighted. It's not mom and pop local banks. This is New York and DC here at play doing this work. If you see 2008 in this context, you see the growth. What actually happened is the domestic financial sector went into a shock. It refused to create more credit. And ever since 2008, the federal government has had to start chipping in and filling the void here. You see this looks like the subcontinent of India. The domestic financial system players totally pulled back. They actually started going in contraction mode as the financial system went into a heart attack in 2008. And the federal government, to keep that system from going into really collapse, had to increase the Treasury debt just to keep that thing going, right? So you see kind of the domestic finance but public, it really still kind of trending up. But this QE, all of that ramp up in debt, it's really just a shift over from the banks saying no more, we can't do anymore. Now the federal government has to shift in. This has shifted over. The credit system has taken a phase change shift. Like the problem has worked its way up to the sovereign balance sheet. Point there. If we're going to do 64 trillion more just to get what this system needs to perpetuate, there's a couple options here. There's two paths. You keep cranking up that blue group, or you kind of find a way to get this orange group, the private sector, businesses, state and local governments, to, again, lever up. They don't want to do that, though. They're not taking on loans to the same degree, to the growth they would need that the kind of the system dynamics demand. So think about how do you square that circle? If you just want to keep running the public sector-driven fiscal deficits, we kind of, I don't know, where that thing keeps going on that trajectory. I don't know that I'd call it interesting. I'd call it more scary. We've seen sovereign debt situations get like this before. What's the alternative path, right? You got to get the private sector to take on the debt burden and lever up. Like people have to get bullish. How do you do that? Well, that's where this group here, remember that chart of CME where Bitcoin was way over here on pristine collateral? That's where the people in this room, the Bitcoin meetups, this emerging thing that is Bitcoin, as we know, it's the solution to the monetary problem in a variety of ways. I think my assessment, its unique properties make it the pristine collateral where you see that, that other eigenstate, if you will, where it is that, that sound-based money to lend against as a collateral base layer for your US dollar credit claims. Why do I say that? Let's start with just the core intrinsic properties of Bitcoin. I'm not going to give you a lecture on how the blockchain works, how the network secures itself, all of that stuff. Let's just talk about the economic properties. From this system standpoint, that's what's the interesting thing, in my opinion. So $45 billion in daily trading volume globally on the Bitcoin US dollar spot exchange pair. That's your equivalent of like the FX market, the pound to USD or euro to USD. That 45 billion in daily trading volume, it's not the biggest of FX pairs. Those are massive markets. 45 billion is pretty large for daily liquidity to tap into. It's 24/7. It's also traded on over 200 exchanges globally. There's only like 190 or 200 countries. So at this point, like, it's pretty much embedded into every country with a US dollar to Bitcoin exchange as well as a local currency to Bitcoin exchange available probably everywhere except for North Korea at this point. Like, and yeah, so I guess North Korea is not that interesting. Transaction settlement on chain takes 10 minutes. We all know this. Bitcoin network is not bogged down by accounting workflows or just the back end kind of, I'd call it paper pushing. Like trading bonds, it is kind of astonishing if I showed you our daily workflows, the files we send in to our counterparties every day, just to say, here's the bond, here's the security, here's how much we ordered, here's the price. It should be really easy, right? Automated. We got a lot of software tech people in this room. You will not believe me how inefficient this is and the defect rate. It is insane. Like maybe if I do 100 trades in a day, there's like 5 defects. We have to, our accountants, our back office has to go back, review everything, clean it up. Bitcoin doesn't need any accountant. Like there's no one, like the network settles itself. Everything squares up, trues up at the end of the day. There's no, 60-person email threads of back office workers at a global or systemically important commercial bank making these mistakes. So that software and the lack of headcount bloat, that's huge. And then ownership of Bitcoin possession lives with the keys, so transferable, portable, all that stuff. My point there, all of those properties make Bitcoin an ideal collateral for the private sector secured loans. Most of the lending, we talked about those US Treasury loans and favored status, right, as collateral in the system. They're what's termed, or what the term for that is, unsecured lending. There's no asset backing it up, right? There's no asset backing up the US Treasury debt. It's purely financed out of future cash flow, which may or may not occur. And at this point, like a lot of that future cash flow is just coming from new debt creation, right? So the system is feeding upon itself. In Bitcoin, you do secured lending or asset-based lending, or sometimes you'll see it's called like first lien or second lien, where you've actually got claims on a real asset, right? So in private sector lending, a lot of it is like, it has to be secured, right? If you go out, like what's everybody here, if you do have some credit on your name right now, it's probably a home mortgage, right? What's the asset backing it up? It's the real estate. Your auto loan, some of us have an auto loan, it's the physical auto. Like the only unsecured lending in the consumer space is really credit card, right? That's unsecured. That's why the rates are so crazy high. But most of the lending that needs to take place in the private sector, it's got to be secured. And you look on what are the most commonly secured assets. Autos are one. But then it's mostly, you do see some corporates where they'll post their balance sheet assets as collateral, property, plant, equipment, stuff like that. But a ton of it is just real estate. You see all these others, and those are just other categories. What I've plotted here on this chart is when you secure a loan, let's say your credit goes bad, your borrower can't pay you back. What do? You have to do a workout situation, right? And the term for how many pennies on the dollar your lender will achieve, as things go bad on the credit, the term for that is the recovery rate. So here, the 40, 50, 60%, et cetera. That's like if I lend $100, what percentage am I getting back? So 50% means I'm getting back 50 cents on the dollar. Resolution time is my workout time before I actually get that, how long I have to wait before I get that 50 cents back or whatever I recovered, right? After legal fees, time in court, et cetera, right? So most assets, all the real estate, autos, the workout time, it's like 12 months, right, as a lender before you get that cash back. That's cash, that's not earning yield, so it's a huge drag on the system. Bitcoin is uniquely different. All these core properties put you over here. On-chain loans have a recovery rate. If you do have to get into that workout situation, it is extremely rare. But you recover 100 cents on the dollar historically. When I say that, it's not guaranteed. There are no guarantees in life, but that's what they've achieved. Resolution time, minutes, not months, not quarters. And that's because of the liquidity and the finality of settlement that only Bitcoin can offer. So now, this is probably last slide. Thanks for staying with me, everybody. Hopefully this has been interesting. The things everybody wants to get to, right? Price, right? All right. I usually don't like to give price targets, but this is like a first principles approach. I won't talk price in most discussions. It's not the most interesting thing about Bitcoin, but we all like it, right? We want to see the number go up. So Bitcoin's adoption as collateral drives its price appreciation. What does that mean, right? The more credit creation you see in lending into housing, right? There's a fixed stock of housing. We can build more, but it takes time to increase the housing stock. But as you ramp up the total amount of mortgages onto the housing stock, what is that going to do to housing prices? Anybody want to guess? It's going to go up, right? Now, pricing and creation in the real economy has some ability to respond, right? Housing developers respond to that price signal. They go out and seek the profits. They go out and create more. Bitcoin is different. Like it is inelastic, completely inelastic as a collateral layer. There's nothing else in the asset class mix, anything else competing that matches its perfect elasticity. So the more dollar lending that gets kind of collateralized at the Bitcoin base layer, Bitcoin supply can't respond any faster than the preconditioned money supply is already embedded. Like maybe you could speed it up, throw some more hash in for 2 weeks at a time. Difficulty adjustment's going to beat you. You're not going to speed up the monetary supply to any meaningful degree than what we all know programmatically exists. So my point here, let's get into that. So everybody kind of sees that, you put it together. The collateralization of Bitcoin will drive a meaningful chunk of price appreciation in this 10-year framework we're talking about with the CBO. Current market size, I think it's probably about $10 billion. That's just, if you ask me, that's just my own internal numbers. There's no data series, there's no tracking, there's no Fed that's going to tell you how much. This is all private lending, it's all private players. We know there's no lender of last resort. Bitcoin is our lender of last resort. So we don't get centralized reporting here. But if you just say, remember I said we need $40 trillion of credit creation in the system just to pay for those big four categories of entitlements is what this all boils down to, like at the first principles approach, paying for the programs of FDR, LBJ, et cetera. Let's just say the Bitcoin-backed lending grows from 10 billion, where I think it is today, to a 1 trillion market in 2034 or a 10 trillion market in 2034. 1 trillion implies a 58% CAGR, just in terms of growing from 10 billion to 1 trillion, or going from 10 billion to 10 trillion implies 100% CAGR, right? That window is really, if you think about it, that's pretty much in line with what you've seen with the CAGR of Bitcoin, since, you can't say since Jan 3rd, 2009, because there wasn't a price struck until the two pizzas existed, right? The two pizza trade. But since we've had price discovery on Bitcoin, it's basically been growing at a CAGR, within that ballpark. So, treat this as my McKinsey level pitch deck estimate. This is where I see the market going. Now, if we go there and you agree with me, somewhere between $1 and $10 trillion is what Bitcoin-backed US dollar lending will eat up as its market share of that $40 trillion non-UST credit creation that is going to have to take place. If you agree with me that those are reasonable numbers, the only other input you get or you need to put a price target on this is the percent of the Bitcoin supply, so out of 21 million, how many of those are encumbered as collateral for a loan at any given time? It shouldn't be that high. A lot of us are hodling our stacks, et cetera. There's only a layer, some fraction of the total supply at any given time that will be posted as collateral for a loan. So just some numbers here to do some scenario analysis. 1%, 2.5%, 5%, 10%, right? Just do those things, and I plugged in an assumption, we're going to originate at 40% LTV. Why 40%? Well, because we know we can do it and have performant investment grade credit, right? Look at our track record. I didn't introduce ourselves fully in what we do. Cameron and I up here at Build are, we're dollar capital supply as fixed income credit managers into this space. We know that the 40% LTV is performant. We can lend into this market and not lose capital, right, in dollar terms. So I'll just put 40% there because I know we're not going to blow it. So if you do those assumptions, what does that imply for price? It's a pretty wide range, but in 10 years, you get at the low end, and just based on those assumptions, you get a low end price of $1.2 million per Bitcoin, all the way up to, if you go with the aggressive assumptions, $120 million per Bitcoin. You say, Matt, those are crazy numbers. How could we ever see this, right? This next chart down here backs out the implied compounded annual rate of growth over a 10-year horizon, based at the starting point of 60K. Put these slides together back in mid-September, price was 60K. So I know we're at like 66, little bit of errors, but these are all just, estimates anyway. So you back these prices out versus the price base, starting point of 60K. What does that imply for the compound annual rate of growth? Low end, 35%. That's well below on the range of where Bitcoin has been if you clock it on, running 10-year time horizons, all the way up to 114%, which is it's on the aggressive end. So somewhere in here, like these assumptions, if you just walk this through as first principles, where we're going, I have people who come to me and are like, man, I know Bitcoin's been a great investment for the last 10, 15 years, but do you think this journey can really continue? Well, it's like, all you have to do on the first principles assumptions here, the only assumptions I've made are that the US Treasury situation, like the deficit situation, continues. If you buy into that and you get to the point where you have the first principles understanding of Bitcoin and all of its properties, you understand its properties, you understand what it is, those are the drivers to this number. Like this process does continue. So at the end of the day, the Bitcoin to dollar price, it is actually a credit system dynamic. Like Bitcoin exists, in my opinion, from the blockchain, from a technical standpoint, it's unchanging, right? We just change who owns who owns how many Bitcoin at any given time. The dollar price you see quoted on a day-to-day basis that we all follow on our phones way too often. It's a function of the credit system dynamics. So this isn't the only driver. There's the direct effect of the growth in Bitcoin as a medium exchange, like the circular economy route. But from the credit system of the piece of its value, this is it. So y'all can make a fancier model, but you don't, my opinion, as kind of one of the leading people, I'd say, focusing on this side of Bitcoin. I really think what I just showed you I took way too long there, but this is, in my opinion, all the understanding you need to get to where we're going. All right, so Wyatt, I went way too long there. We had some questions, some Q&A.
Yes.
Let's open it up.
No, thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. I think one of my biggest takeaways from seeing that information, and if you guys don't follow Matt on socials or Build, he hits a podcast circuit. It's great, macroeconomic information to follow. But I'm just always so flabbergasted by how manipulated our capital markets are, and it's just like you really have to be like a Bitcoiner to see past that. And so, it's like it was very common. Everybody knows like the 60-40 portfolio, and it's like that's been parroted for such a long time. So when I'm working with clients, we really take an extra step to see past it, because this is what's at stake. What Matt was talking about. It's like I can't in good faith just say like it's going to be all right, because I think we all can agree in this room, if we stay on this current rate, like it's not. So I'm very appreciative of your guys' efforts at Build to offer people opportunities to get exposure to Bitcoin in different ways. And I want to specifically dive into the credit fund here a little bit, because this is something I've been fascinated with. And so we just think of like, yes, we can buy the bare asset. I think one of the beauties of Bitcoin is that we can, as sovereign individuals, can take custody of the bare asset. That's something very unique in terms of assets. And so that's great. We offer different self-custody models to our partners at Unchained. If you guys haven't heard of Unchained, we have a representative, Ben Brila, here in the crowd. Definitely recommend checking out their services. But that's all through 2-3 multi-sig vault setup, where we have full control over our Bitcoin. But a lot of financial advisors now, or different sorts of capital advisors, advocate for the ETF. I'm much less of a fan for that, but if we think different pools of capital have different investment requirements, and a lot of that being in fixed income. And so what you guys are doing with the private credit fund, of getting exposure to Bitcoin in a private credit fund, walk us through how that idea was conceived, and kind of the mechanics of how you guys are able to offer yield on Bitcoin denominated loans.
Yeah. So when people say they're seeking yield for their Bitcoin, this is not that. You don't going after yield on Bitcoin in Bitcoin terms. That's a loser's game. You're gonna lose your Bitcoin. So that's not what we're addressing. So we came at this problem from the standpoint of a fixed income and credit manager, and really we took everybody saw what happened post 2008, QE, et cetera. The inflation didn't show. We had people shouting like Pollyannas after QE 1 and 2, and into Operation, what was it, Twist, stuff like that. This is going to lead to massive inflation. Well, it didn't show up, right? But when COVID happened, March 2020, and then CARES Act, $6 trillion of money printing, all that dynamic we saw in some of those charts. That was it was the COVID moment where I really came to realize we don't have time. We need to get this dollar fixed income, just credit IOUs, that it's the largest asset class in the world, probably. It's either fixed income and real estate. We're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in each. For reference, the U.S. equity market cap, all stock index, it's $50 trillion. So we're talking 3, 4, maybe 5 times the size in fixed income, right? So these IOUs are people's savings, and where it hits me, the rubber hits the road, it's our coworkers, it's our parents, it's our relatives, it's people in our community, people we go to church with, all that. They're all they're not in Bitcoin. They're in the view that that's the good stuff. The UST is up in that top right. That's where you need to be. And when we started to work through that process, that impulse I showed on one of those charts, and then the CPI, this inflation wave we just hit, the bond market sell-off, we were trying to get ahead of that problem early on, but I realized it's kind of like that Jaws moment, and I think the first movie was we're going to need a bigger boat. I was we don't have time. These people are going to get debased, and it's going to be fast and way harder than people think. It's going to come in waves, but people's fixed income funds, their IOU investments, where a lot the 60-40 rule is just a sliding scale. It's basically just own your age in bonds. And so my parents, my grandparents are 70, 80. They probably were 70, 80% in bonds. Their purchasing power in those positions got debased by 35, 40%, over a third losses in 3 years. And that's when it's we got to get that bigger boat ASAP. And that's where Parker Lewis was still at Unchained, but Cameron, Parker, and I started working on exactly this, what we're doing today, to get that done. But it's really, We can all, the Bitcoiners here, I know there's some new people. The Bitcoin people are extremely passionate about bringing new people into Bitcoin, but you can only pull so many people on with you, like every cycle into Bitcoin. We're never going to save all of that purchasing power that's going to be lost just through Bitcoin adoption alone, because the adoption into Bitcoin is going to come in waves. So basically, it's like, yeah, we're going to try to leave as few people behind here, or to take that monetary debasement as possible. So that's how we got here.
Yeah, totally. No, thank you for your efforts at Build. And I think that's like a perfect illustration of why we need to use some of the traditional finance tools, strategies, and products available. I'm certainly guilty of this, where it's like as Bitcoiners we kind of demonize the existing financial system, and there's certainly a plethora of reasons why. But I think a great example of how we can pull more capital into Bitcoin using tried and true strategies is like through our partners at Unchained, we can offer clients a Bitcoin IRA, right? So this is a tax advantage account. You kind of think about it as like this IRS paper wrapper and a 203 multi-signature vault, right? And so you still maintain access to your funds, your coins. You're a sovereign individual, but in return you're receiving some sort of tax benefit. So there are a lot of creative ways we can start attracting different pools of capital into Bitcoin. And I know a big part of your regular job is talking to large pools of capital, whether that be hedge funds, pension funds. What would you say the institutional view of Bitcoin in traditional finance is right now?
So I'd say there's a spectrum. You've got a very small number, like there's Bitcoiners embedded throughout society at this point. When I say Bitcoiners, I mean Bitcoin only. Like they're not crypto, they're Bitcoin. Those people exist in every institution. So we talked about like a bloated, large cap U.S. commercial bank. Oh, there's Bitcoiners working there. There's Bitcoiners working at the Fed. They're in there, right? But for the most part, when you go to the investment committee, they're not there. Like very rarely are you going to get one out of like the 5 votes you would need to do something like, enter a position in Bitcoin, something like that. But I would say right now, if you just take the temperature, you go to the conferences where these finance professionals are, you get a few who are like, I see it. And then you get a smaller group who is pro-crypto. It's kind of like the blockchain, not Bitcoin argument, which, that one's already done and put to bed, in my opinion. Like, that battle's over. Like, we know the faster horse. That question's been settled. But I still see people like, a CIO of a mega cap name sitting down in a one-on-one meeting with him. He's like, well, we have a different view on Bitcoin. We don't think it lasts. We don't think it's the winner. We think it'll be something else. Something else to them, it's like, well, what is that something else? They don't know. They don't have anything. So when you're there, you're like, your something else is something that doesn't even exist. It's like, no, you got to follow trend. You can only invest in things that exist. So like, if you tell me something's better, it's like, okay, I'm open to that something better, but like, get in the game. Like, what is it? So you see those people, and then you just see like dead last no. Like, I did this presentation, not this exact one. I'm refining this as we go on. It changes, but there was like a summit in Dana Point, California. Just nice hotel by the beach, bunch of finance professionals, and one of them, after the fact, 2 statements from the same individual, both of them asinine. First one was in the lunch buffet line. He's like, I'll buy Bitcoin when the Fed starts putting it on its balance sheet. It's like, well, that's like, by the time it gets there, the trade is milked. It's like, okay, so if that's the signal you're waiting for, it's like, you're gonna be a little bit late, Bob. And the second one in his email, he's like, nice presentation, great job. Lending into Bitcoin is insane, or something like that. It's like, well, I don't know, in my opinion, lending to the US Treasury, where your debt service and your future payment of interest is only possible because the existing claimants are being paid off only by the creation of new debt. I don't know, that sounds insane to me. So, 2 different perspectives. We're living in 2 different worlds now, if you got my cat analogy at the beginning. So the rest of the financial industry, I would say 90% are still up there. 1% are over here with us, and then 9% are just whatever. I don't know. Like, I'm open to anything, kind of like an agnostic is in terms of religion.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I want to ask a similar question, but a little more pointed for fun's sake. Do you think most financial professionals are either A, unaware of the U.S. debt situation, B, aware but ignoring it, or C, don't think it's a problem?
Probably all the above. They hold all those views in the same time because we've never had to deal with it. Like, you think about the people in these seats right now, you get to like age 60, 65, you retire out. Like, Wall Street's a young man's game. You put in your analyst years, 120-hour weeks, you grind. And then a lot of people, like, you can make a lot of money quickly. A lot of people, the career span is like 5-10 years, then they go retire, they do something else. The people who last, they become the management at like Goldman Sachs, et cetera. Those are kind of your lifers, if you will. It's maybe like 10%, 20% of every like entry-level analyst class from college recruiting every year, like stays on and joins the management ranks. But it's an industry that tilts young, like it's a I don't call it like a pyramid structure, but the organizing structure, you have the senior people who've seen a lot. They're at the top, like Jamie Dimon, bring up that example. All indicators look like he's about to like exit the industry. He's very likely to be the next Secretary of the Treasury, is what it looks like to me, if you're just reading the tea leaves. So he's ready to turn in his spikes and go into like the public service. All right, your 65-year-olds live up there, but if you're 65, your market experience started in like 1980, like at the earliest. So you haven't actually portfolio managed through an inflationary environment. Most of those people are done. Like, they're out of the seat or they're dead. So the people in the chairs right now have never seen this, and they've also never seen the U.S. Treasury in a sovereign debt situation like it is right now, like, which really looks a lot like an emerging market. To them, this like big transition that's taking place, it's unfathomable. Like, it's like being on the Titanic, if you see that meme, and you say, like, but this ship can't sink. Like, it's literally like there's a lot of that mindset because they've never seen it before, and maybe they don't lack the imagination to see the possibilities of what could be going on right now, maybe even what's likely going on right now, or they also, it's just more comfortable to just ignore it, just assume that everything that's worked out so far, status quo will continue indefinitely until they hang it up and turn into that 65-year-old themselves.
No, totally. Thank you
The
for
ostrich head in the sand.
Yeah. I like to use this analogy of, if you think like you have like this brand new pickaxe, it's nice and sharp. Like, this is a tool where you can make skilled precision strikes with, but then you just keep banging it against a rock over and over again. Like, you end up with like this dull chunk of metal, and you're ultimately just like banging a rock against a rock. And I use that to try to explain like this central planning like philosophy, or it's like, oh, these central planners like the Fed, like they'll take care of us, and kind of speak into like these older generations. I do think like there were points like in our history where these institutions had merit, they had a proven track record, but they've just abused their power so much where now they're using these dull tools that don't actually affect change, and we're stuff left bearing the consequences of their decision making. And that's why I think while I'm as optimistic on Bitcoin as you could probably be, I do think we need to be careful putting like so much on its shoulders. But I do think there's an opportunity specifically with financial planning. It's like you can work Bitcoin into like a financial picture in like multiple different ways. Like, we've talked about how in a traditional portfolio management system or strategy, like now we have fixed income exposure. In a financial planning perspective, we have like inheritance planning, and I think there used to be like this great respect for wealth, and I think as Bitcoiners, like, we need to prepare for kind of being like the decision makers of tomorrow. And we can look back at times of history where wealth and capital were more accurately or truly represented in the market because there wasn't such manipulation. There wasn't like this 800-pound gorilla in the room with their thumb on the scale. And we see these in Europe where you have these wealthy aristocrats, and they had took great pride in stewarding their wealth and contributing to their community, because it was largely up to the elite in these small communities to provide for the local communities, and not like this behemoth government where it's like we'll just bail you out. Don't worry about it. And so it really kind of removed like this individual sense. And so moral of the story is like, it is, important that we recognize the importance of our wealth, how we're situated in the future, and how we will, handle that as Bitcoiners moving forward. And, with that being said, we'd love to open up the questions to the audience. Yeah, Matt.
So I'm an asset-based lender for my job,
Oh, cool.
my day job. The practical application of this, and the amount of people that would be interested in taking 40% of their value. Speak to that, if you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So, I'm typically doing a 70 LTV.
Okay.
Right? And like if I'm killing it, I get a 60 LTV.
Yep.
You're here telling me I can get a 40 LTV.
Well, you have to because of the volatility embedded in Bitcoin. Like, you can't get rid of that. People are like, I would invest in Bitcoin if it were less volatile. Like, the volatility just has to be there. It's the price of return. So the 40%, you have to do that to protect the principal. That's like the
I
minimum. Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
my position as a lender, why would I do anything with 40?
Yeah. So
Why
would the
owner?
Yep,
put
exactly.
up
So,
whatever?
great question. So the borrower in this case, the actual lending client, this is where Rocky from Unchained, talked to him at the space.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
have no idea what Unchained is.
Okay.
So
Oh, well, this guy over here, talk to him after the fact. He'll set you up. But okay, the client who comes to Unchained, and these are all commercial loans. They're not conceptual
so
loans.
these are not individuals?
No, no. It is businesses only. So these are businesses, entrepreneurs. It's all small and middle market business. You can't go to a corporation right now. Like, the fact that MicroStrategy is the only one to adopt Bitcoin as a balance sheet reserve asset, it's a special situation. But if you're, go ahead.
No, I did it.
Oh, you did it? Oh, cool.
I took it on chain loan.
All right.
So I own a small 1.5 megawatt Bitcoin mine. And because of other businesses I was in, our lending capacity, SBA, UCC, other things, were tapped out. So I couldn't do as traditional. It was a startup mine. And so we just put our Bitcoin up. We took an Unchained loan. I think at the time it was 40% LTV with a 12% interest rate, interest only, and that founded the mine.
Thank you.
And we effectively paid it off over the course of the last 3 years, but we did it, and because it was the only.
You pay that monthly, if I can ask?
Yeah, it was a month. It was I think $1,000 a month with the interest carry. And
Yeah, 100,000, 12%,
Yeah.
100,000 a month.
something
Yeah.
like that. Not more like a quarter, but yeah. So over the course of 3 years, we with the appreciation, we then wiped it out. But it was we had the Bitcoin. We couldn't lever the Bitcoin in any other way. So, but we also couldn't go to a bank and say, we're buying $250,000 worth of transformers and stuff. You know how to lend on that? And you're like, yeah, we do, but we don't like you, so go.
So then let me ask this, so one of the, and feel free here, you feel free.
Right here.
Or not, whoever.
He's actually brand new at Unchained. This is like week 3 for him. So do it easy.
So you know everything.
Rocky here is the vet. You want to talk to Rocky in the space when he comes
Like
back.
one
Yeah.
of the, so what's the balloon on that? So
So it was a 12-month interest only with it. So we had to roll it every year. So let's say it was, assume we took 250 for the first year. It was a balloon of 250 at the end of the year. Of course, we knocked it down the other way.
So the takeout on something, traditionally, you're looking as a private money lender, you're like, ability to pay.
Yep.
Right? How are you gonna take me out, right? And then, of course, LTV.
Yeah.
Right? So you got the LTV, like,
Yep.
slammed.
We
That's
don't
awesome.
we don't do PIC. We don't do any of the other BS.
How do they pay you out?
Because listen to him. He's engaging and he's in value creation.
Find someone else to.
Well, no, so there's 3 different ways we can find another lender, when obviously.
On the Bitcoin.
Well, either well now.
Or on something else.
Well, the way we finally got out of the final bit is now the bank trusted us because we had cash flow and everything, so then they did the UCC loan. But the other 2 ways is obviously we have cash flow from the actual business itself, and the third way is we can liquidate.
Yeah, these guys. So the client segment, the niche that we're tapping into is the
Is that what most people do? Most people are liquidating?
Actually, you prefer not to.
Well, clearly.
Yeah. No, so.
It was at 20, now it's 60. I could now I can choose to liquidate.
Yeah. So what it is, the niche segment here is the Bitcoin adopting entrepreneur who has chosen to reserve Bitcoin as their balance sheet asset. They get it. They're not going to reserve T-bill. They're not going to reserve that system's idea. They want this. They want the Bitcoin. It's connected with them. A lot of these have been small, family-owned, middle market. Some of these miners are big, but they're engaged in real productive enterprise in the economy. The difference is they're Bitcoin adopting. They want Bitcoin as their balance sheet reserve asset, and it's working for them like extremely well because they get it from first principles. And the market is catching up to where they are. So that's your client segment. Banks don't like them, as I said.
Well, the reason I'll take a 40% LTV is because the banks don't like me. The option is I take a 0 LTV, sell the Bitcoin, and I take the cash and do the business out.
You don't want to do that.
Don't want to.
Yeah. So, and our clients, sir, do you want to lose your Bitcoin? Like, no. They are extremely incentivized not to get liquidated. Like, I don't know. Maybe you'd give your left little toe before you liquidated your Bitcoin
Really
stack
close.
at this
My dad
point.
gave me a loan.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
So none of these are individuals, they're all.
No, there
small
is no consumption-based, retail lending. This is not going to fund someone's Lambo purchase, crypto bros stuff you saw on Twitter in 2016, This is not crypto culture. This is entrepreneurs engaged in real and productive enterprise across all segments. He's a miner, but you see that I've met dry cleaners. He's not a plant. I have never met him before, but we probably funded his loan. But there's no specific. That would be too clever by half for me. Like this is hard enough to build it as is. I can't plan those details, but it exists. It's here. But it's not just miners. It's truly any industry, any mom and pop. Adopt Bitcoin. It could be a restaurant chain, whatever. You do that. You tap this as a capital source.
So Unchained, are you getting are we talking thousands of calls a day? Are we talking dozens of calls a day? Like the market,
Sure, it's more like dozens right now.
dozens of calls a day. That's still good.
Call me first, Matt.
Yeah, total.
What's that?
Call me first.
Yeah, total client base right now, it's in the hundreds. Yeah, not thousands.
Total client base
Yeah,
is in the hundreds.
yeah. Well, lending, like there's a lot of like families, family offices, et cetera, who just want Unchained as kind of a cold storage vault custody help. Like Bitcoin's it's a bearer asset money. Takes some technical competence to store your private keys. Unchained is built up, like their vault product is that. So there's no leverage, there's no lending model attended. It's just vault cold storage for individuals, families, businesses, et cetera, to custody their Bitcoin. And then the lending product is a layer on top of that. So it's hundreds right now, not thousands, but this is a growing niche. Our the number of clients going up, loans are going up, adoption just continues to go up, and as Bitcoin price goes up, like the firms are doing well. If you check in over, like it's volatile, they got to ride the demon, right? That is Bitcoin price. Right? It feels good when it's hitting new all-time highs. Like when it's down, it's bad, right? So you got to ride that, but all in all, 4-year, 5-year cycles, like it's a growth industry, boom and bust. It's like railroads in late 19th century. And so to lend into railroads, tons of capital loss happen, right? So you got to figure out as the lender how to fund dollar capital into that industry as the collateral, is going to switch places. Like that reversal is going to happen. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Bo?
Yeah, great presentation, Matt. Crystal ball question for you. So if your estimation is the Bitcoin lending market size today is 10 billion, and that grows, a trillion to 10 trillion, and who knows, right? Obviously, your guess is as good as anybody's, but what's your expectation for over the next 10 years, how that market evolves, right? So the things that I'm thinking about are, so BNY got this exemption from SAB 121, so banks are going to start to be able to custody. I think there's a lot of people that expect over the next year or two, SAB 121 may do a deal entirely. And so I guess the question is, how much of that market is filled by banks? What does that do over time to, loan terms, LTVs, pricing, et cetera? And that's a big question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious your guess.
Yeah. So my gut, like one of my favorite books is Daniel Yergin's The Prize, if anybody's read it. It goes through the history of the oil industry from Colonel Drake figuring out how to get oil out of the ground in a drilled well in like Pennsylvania right after the Civil War, all the way up to like Gulf War I. It's like 120 years. It's called the prize because that's what it is. Everybody's going after this thing, and you just see, like, it's just a crash course in an MBA and an actual business strategy, mergers and acquisitions. Point there why I bring it up, that what we lived through with oil, like that massive industry and all that value, all the business creation, like it really defines a lot of history once you view it through that lens. That same thing is going to happen in Bitcoin, in my opinion. We're so early. Like, we've got a capital base deployed here of like $30 million. Like, we're going to compound, obviously, but there's going to be mergers and acquisitions. There's going to be strategic decisions, all of this. Like, we're already getting those floaters. So what you see here with BNY, SAB 121 waivers, all that stuff, it's like, yeah, they know it. Like, but it takes time for them to move. And so it's just going to be a rapidly evolving industry. Like, when you see me come here in like 2 years, 3 years, like, there's going to be so much change. And just to get out a crystal ball and say what's going to happen, each individual operator has just got to play with their own skin in the game. And when you say, what do you do with LTVs? What do you do with originations? Well, we know what happens when you cut corners, like you rehypothecate, right? You don't secure the Bitcoin collateral. You just post it behind the desk. It goes into the bucket shop. Those credits go to zero. Like, those are distressed. They don't go to zero, but they end up as distressed. You're in the claimants court where Mt. Gox claims, FTX claims, all of that, BlockFi claims, all that. They wind up in distress. So you want to avoid that, obviously. Like, we're focused on IG. The distressed vultures are going to have their day. Bitcoin is just going to be one of many opportunities for them. Our goal, stay out of distressed land. But what you say is, like, people will come in, new entrants will come in and go after this as they see the returns. Like, your moat is scale, that matters. It's track record, all that stuff. But it's also who you have sitting in the risk chair, and there's better decision makers than others. So people will cut corners on LTV. Unchained was not the lowest originator in LTV. There were loans funded in 2020, 2021, Bitcoin-backed, crypto-backed loans that had no chance of being profitable, like, period. And Unchained execs came in, like, how are they doing this? It's like, they're just making something. They're trying to, do things like rehypothecate collateral, go achieve profit in other ways. You saw firms like Gemini, et cetera, come to the brink with risk. So the answer is, what happens with LTVs? Yeah, they'll be stretched, just like other, credit and credit adjacent business, like the insurance industry is a good example of this. Everybody in the insurance industry knows the Warren Buffett secret at this point. You're after that float, right? And that incentivizes originators to come in and underwrite policies at economic level, like prices that they shouldn't, but they can't resist. They don't want to turn away. They don't have the patience to wait and do nothing or pass on business, as opposed to just whatever, going out and keeping the client, just making something happen. So you're going to go through that same dynamic. There's going to be booms, busts. There's going to be failures. Like this credit cycle that you've seen, like in the Bitcoin niche, it's not over. We'll come talking like 4 or 5 years. There's going to be other wipeouts. I think my approach is, like, our objective is never to be one of them.
Sure. Well, just one clarifying follow-up. I mean, if the market in 10 years for lending against Bitcoin is $5 trillion, banks are going to have to be a meaningful part of that, right? And so I guess a more specific crystal ball, and I know it's impossible to say, but I'm just curious your gut, right, is when do you think banks will start lending against Bitcoin, assuming that SOP 121 is repealed in the next year or so?
We'll see. Who wins the election? That's gonna have repercussions. But just follow the growth trend of, like, private credit, right? It's $1.5 trillion. We're technically, I'd call us a niche of direct lending, private credit. We've got our Bitcoin adopting entrepreneurs. That's our client segment here. It's gonna be a massive growth market. But we're really treading on the wake of and when you talk about banks getting into this, you're treading in the wake of this private credit emergent phenomenon, which, in my opinion, that's not going away either. So you're riding multiple waves here. The banks will lend into private credit. They don't want to lend into the risky private, small and mid-scale corporates, is what they're avoiding. And so what the banks do, they'll lend to your private credit funds, your Blackstones, they all have partnerships. your PE and private credit behemoths, they all have bespoke one-on-one agreements with like a large cap bank. Like they're all in the game. And so the banks will lend, most private credit is levered 2 to 1 as opposed to a bank, which is 10 to 1. But the banks are starting to gobble up. They will funnel that private credit growth. And so eventually, like the banks will approach the Bitcoin-backed lending, my assessment right now, to this in a lot of the same ways that they're like the same behaviors they're following and going after this private credit opportunity, because the banks are getting some of the economics there as well. They are capturing some of those economics. So it'll look something like that.
One thing I'll add on to that is, so obviously there's a lot of good principles of traditional finance we can apply to Bitcoin, but there's also a lot of skewed incentives and bad things traditional finance companies have done. And so just to emphasize on some of the things that Matt was talking about there, it's very important. We're moving into the Bitcoin revolution with like the Bitcoin ethos in mind, right? That's why I give a ton of props to Bitcoin native companies like Build, like Unchained, like Basilic for stewarding the core ethos that is 2 or 3 multi-signature, that is not rehypothecating customer funds. And so it's like, be very careful how we're doing due diligence on companies that are new to the space. Like there's a lot of games you can play. So you warn everybody to keep an eye out for those things. Like FTX is like a great example of that. I'm a little disappointed in Wall Street. We have the ETF. This is kind of exciting. And I think 11 of the 13 issuers custody at one place, like Fidelity and one other ETF issuer, have actually taken upon themselves to custody Bitcoin as opposed to just outsourcing it to somebody else. So it's very important. It's like this. We're kind of on a knife's edge. Like this could go either way, and it's like it's important that Bitcoin native companies are leading the charge and doing it the Bitcoiner way. Eric, I think you had a question.
Expanding on his question. So there's this, I don't want to say circular, but symbiotic relationship between the expansion and maturity of the credit market and then the value of the underlying collateral that credit market's supporting. Like, how do you view that today? Like, as what you guys are doing becomes more mature, more competitive, more efficient, and how do you view that impacting volatility? Like, you gave that 5-year time horizon.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because this is like the biggest question in my mind when I think about what's going to be impacting Bitcoin's volatility over the next decade. And do you foresee within a decade some sort of, maturity within that market that ultimately might significantly impact the LTVs you're dealing with right now?
Yeah, great question. I think right now we're talking like 10 years down the road, that's I can only make the fuzzy projections, like just where is credit going? And then where is Bitcoin? I know there's 21 million. Credit, I know the numbers are like, just keep extrapolating those curves. The big picture drivers, like you can kind of get where those trends are. But yeah, when you do create more credit on the fixed supply base of 21 million, you've got to match up with the underlying market, right? You've got like $45 billion in daily liquidity. Well, that like you ratchet up, like you scale up the credit creation, that daily liquidity needs to go up. Otherwise, you don't have the liquidity to sell into, right? And then you get those big down candles where the liquidations take place. Like that's how you get the classic like 80% drawdown Bitcoin cycle, right? So my opinion on that, like these 80% drawdowns, the fact that, this doesn't look like any other stuff. Like you see some equities with like 80%, 100% annualized volatility, but usually like it's not like a repeating underlying wave. So this kind of tells you what that tells me from like the statistical sense would be like, no, that's actually the mean and distribution or mean and standard deviation of the process that we're following. And so what's happening, the credit creation is kind of scaling up with those things. And the Bitcoin numbers are locked in and finite. Those are perfectly clear. Those are kind of unchangeable. We just trade who owns what of those 21 million Bitcoin at a time. But you've got to scale all of those other parameters, like the amount of credit claims outstanding, the coin supply, the amount that's encumbered by a loan. Like if there's too much of the supply burdened, like posted as collateral on a loan, it's like, well, then there's not enough float in the USD to Bitcoin stock market. And at the same time, you've got more dollar creation, like dollar creation just goes up and to the right. So all of those drivers have to move in tandem. And then the volatility is just kind of bouncing around as you just find the boundary conditions on all those things. And that's how we're just going to keep getting, my opinion, drawdowns. You know, maybe we don't hit 85, 90% again, but yeah, don't be surprised if there's another 75, 80%. Like, I don't think these cycles are over. Like, this just has to keep going until, I don't know what the end state looks like. It may not be in our lifetimes. I don't know. But
Do you think that there's going to be some sort of, quasi-collateralized version of Bitcoin? Like, do you expect that we're always going to be using, on-chain, lightning, different forms of settlement, or do you expect that we're going to have a more derivative-based form of collateral settlement on it that, might actually end up having some sort of expansion of supply de facto for these kind of markets?
yeah, I don't think you'll ever have the expansion of 21 million. But this is where you get into the technical, like you go to a BitDevs for these discussions. And yeah, I don't know if they've made it to Bitcoin Improvement Protocol status yet, but Cameron here is my resident like BitDevs examiner. But we've seen like a couple approaches where they want to basically, I don't know, you're kind of doing this already with sidechains somewhat too. Like you take the Bitcoin, you move it over here, Liquid Network, something like that. Like the way these things work, like, I don't know, Lightning already kind of is a derivative on-chain Bitcoin. So, but it's not a supply expansion just because you have to settle with your counterparties. And I think those layer 2s fail if you don't resolve down to layer 1, right? That's Bitcoin lender of last resort. Like you can't print money supply. It's always been Chancellor is on the brink of second bailout of banks. So I think just the base money core that Bitcoin is, those economics incentives are so powerful. I don't know, the layer 2s, they'll try it, but I think there will be nothing to it. They'll peter out, they'll die. I don't know, that's my opinion, but we'll see that in practice as it plays out. I don't know.
Yeah, Dylan.
I have a question. I just want to be cognizant of your time. I know you have tickets. It's about 6 minutes till halftime.
Oh man. Well, that's been fun. I still didn't have any takers yet. I emailed. I don't know. We still have one to go. Cameron may tap out too, so I may have two.
But yeah, if people want to go to the game, Matt's got tickets.
He wants to go. No.
Wave it in. Wave it in. Come on. It's 2 guaranteed Hall of Famers. One of them, I'm talking Jokic here, an all-timer. You guys can see him anytime. 41 games a year in Denver. So I've never seen Jokic live, so it's kind of one of those things. And also, it's the fake Sonic, so I'd love to see him get crushed.
Well, with that being said, we'll probably wrap it there. And I just want to thank you again, Matt, for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Make an announcement about the soiree.
Oh, and last thing,
Just quick announcement real quick.
Space opening week is November 14th through the 16th.